The idea is that we will give them the blueprints, so we give them all of the CRMs, the systems, the automations, the AI products, all of that stuff, the job boards, everything that they need. And then they go into a specialized sector. We pay them 70% of the fee. We take 30 as a business, and then we'll help them with all of the back-end admin, invoicing, and that kind of stuff. So essentially what we're trying to do is take away all of the thought process, the horrible stuff that recruiters don't like doing, and give them the freedom to pick their clients, pick and choose when they work. They really get to run it themselves.
What happens when you apply ultra-marathon discipline to recruitment? My guest today, James Rowe, has a story unlike any other we've covered on the podcast. After getting fired from more jobs than he can remember, he stumbled into recruitment, discovered his entrepreneurial streak, and went on to create a platform that empowers recruiters to build successful, independent businesses.
There are some other smaller things that we look for. How do they know their niche? We're not here to babysit. I'm not here to teach people how to close deals. I'm not here to teach them, the basics of recruitment. We can help them specialize and sharpen their skills, especially in business, because that's side that they're traditionally be lacking.
James's journey is about turning chaos into clarity, combining ultramarathon grit with smart systems, authentic outreach, and a relentless focus on niche markets.
Data is obviously king at the moment. I have a belief that job boards will be gone. At least majority of them will be gone at some point because their value is declining fairly rapidly. AI will take its place. So I think whoever can adopt AI and has a strong database will be the businesses that survive the great recruitment culling, I suppose.
Welcome to the Resilient Recruiter Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Whitby, and this interview was recorded in person in London, which makes a fun change from our usual remote format. In this episode, you'll hear the mindset shift that separates freelance recruiters from true business owners. Plus, simple, repeatable tactics and strategies such as lead magnets that actually get a response, business processes that actually stick, and the habits that sustain performance when things get tough. So I didn't realize when we connected that you're actually Scottish.
Yeah.
So you're from Perth.
Yeah, born in Perth.
Okay, fantastic. And then when did you move down to England?
So I moved when I was 5.
Okay.
So I was quite young, but I played semi-professional rugby for many years.
Wow.
And so I used to travel to Glasgow like once a week.
Okay.
Up until probably the age of about 21.
Oh,
so I spent a lot of time in Scotland.
So you mentioned you ran the Edinburgh Marathon. When was this?
May, ran Edinburgh Marathon.
Oh, so just this year?
Yeah. And
then
cool. 2 weeks ago, I ran an ultra marathon. So
Holy
I ran
cow.
65 miles.
65 miles.
Yes.
I can't even fathom that. So I was really proud. I did the Edinburgh Half Marathon in 2022. That's the furthest that I've run. What inspired you to run the ultra?
It's been on my bucket list for a long time.
Okay.
I mean, it's one of these things that I like to push myself physically because but I have to be able to work towards something.
Okay.
And so once I've got a target in mind, I'll set it down. So next year I'm doing an Ironman and basically just going, I've always been a physical challenge kind of person.
Yeah.
And there's something very therapeutic about being a recruiter and then just going in silence and running on your own for a couple of hours.
Definitely.
That silence just like breaks the monotony.
I totally get that. I find, like when I'm not running on your level by any means, but I run 2-3 times a week, and it's like just to clear your mind and for your mental health, well-being, and just that's me time basically.
Yeah.
No other, like you physically, you're that's what you're doing. You can't really do anything else. All the other stressors, you kind of just leave behind. And
I found you go to a really, really interesting place as well. Once you go past a couple of hours, you've kind of thought about all of the things you normally think, what am I having for dinner? Oh, how long is it going to be till I get back? And so your mind goes to some, can be horrible places, can be lovely places, but you go through like a roll of emotions. So sometimes I was like super happy and almost in tears thinking about my family, and then other times I wanted to throw them out the window, and it was just like a back and forth. But you have some really weird moments of clarity where I've had some of my best ideas.
Same.
So to do this, I was training and running about 4 or 5 hours over the weekend, back to backs. So I was running 5 hours then on Saturday, and then Sunday do the same again to prepare for it. And, you know, what I was finding is I was coming back I was like, I've had these great ideas, and my partner works in the business with me, and she was like, oh, for God's sake.
Yeah, not another idea. Yeah. Right, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about recruitment. So your story is interesting because I read that this must be an exaggeration, but you got fired from 20 different jobs before you landed in recruitment. Is that a true story?
Yeah, probably. It's around then.
What kind of things were you doing before you discovered recruitment?
So it's like an ongoing joke in our business. So I've done a little bit of everything. So I was a spray painter for Formula One Red Bull.
Okay.
All the way through to hospitality, but I spent the later part of my career in sales. So I've done finance, I've done car sales, estate agency, and just done loads and loads of different things, and couldn't quite get anything to fit. Like I was good at them. I was one of the top performers in every sales job I'd done, but I couldn't quite find something that occupied my brain enough that I would want to do it forever. And so once I got these jobs, I got good at them. I became the top salesperson, and then I got a bit bored. And then I started messing around and doing things I shouldn't, and going out, and, you know, and all of these things that you do in your probably your 20s. And probably been fired from about 15, 20 jobs. Yeah. I wear it as a badge of honor now, though.
Well, what do you have to do to get fired? Like you just what?
My estate agency job was probably the worst firing, so I'll tell you that one. And that was I used to live with one of my friends who was also an estate agent, and we were fairly high up in the hierarchy, so we were referred to as valuers. So we'd go out and basically tell people what their properties were worth.
Yeah.
And
then is the goal to get them to list their property with you?
Yeah, and so we'll bring the property onto the market. We'll stick it on Rightmove and Zoopla and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so we had a full day worth of bookings. It was the next day was Saturday, so I was going to be flat out. And me and my friend had decided that it was going to be a really good idea to go out. And we basically slept through all of our alarms. We could probably come back in about 4 a.m.
Okay.
Just because I think ultimately I look back at it now and I'm like, I just didn't really care.
You didn't care about it?
I just didn't. There was no buy-in from me, and so I sat there and just went nah, and looked at my phone and realised I'd had loads of missed calls and stuff. And long story short, the owner of the business, the boss, ended up walking into our house because neither of us had turned up, saying like, "Are you guys okay?" And we found us and we were in a right state still, and he let me go on the spot.
I mean, fair dude. Probably if you were the boss, you would do the same thing, right?
Like I look back at it now, and I couldn't blame them. Like it was just me being irresponsible. But at the same time, you know, it's almost so fortunate it worked out that way. I look at all of the string of events that happened to lead me to this spot, sat in this chair, and I think, wow, like you couldn't have predicted this at all. Even as a kid, I was super shy, and so like to think that I now have a job where my whole thing is to speak to people would seem absolutely madness.
Wow. Okay. So then, how did you find recruitment?
So after I lost my job in a estate agency, I went to go find another job in an estate agency, and so I started searching around, and I remembered that a gent called me about a job, and so I said, I'm going to find this guy. So I found him in my LinkedIn messages, gave him a call, said, yeah, I'm ready now. He said, what happened? I said, I'm going to tell you the real story, but please don't tell the new person this. So we had that conversation, and he said, look, it's fine. So he set me up a bunch of interviews, and went to the first one, and it was for a direct competitor in a estate agency in my local town of Northampton, and went for that. Got the job. They gave me a really nice salary, you know, first in. It was doing really well for one of the top offices, doing the same thing. Was really excited.
Let me just pause you right here for a sec, because I'm really interested in mindset and psychology and like understanding your journey. But the last job, you really didn't care about it. So why would you want to do another estate agency job?
Do you know what? I was good at it. I was very, very good at it. And I think I knew that I could make money fast. Okay. And so for me, it was in my mind, I don't think I'd necessarily let go of the idea that, because estate agency was maybe a halfway house, because there's a lot of similarities in estate agency.
There's two parties.
Yeah, two parties. You have to negotiate on stuff. And so I look at my time in estate agency, and I actually relay that back to recruitment a lot. You know, if you were to switch out your buyers with your clients, and it's all very comparable. Yeah. But to be honest with you, I think the main thing was that I thought I still cared about it. I was kind of delusional, I suppose, to a certain degree. So I found this next job and, I thought everything was going to go great. And then I remember we used to work in this like little centre with loads of shops and stuff, and there was a lot of footfall and people, and it was a great place. And we looked in the shops, and one of the guys was a bit of a clean freak who run the branch, and he said, I can't find any hand sanitizer in any of the shops. Have you heard about COVID? And within 2 weeks, lost first in, first out.
Wow. So this was fairly recently then. Like we're not talking, this is not ancient history. This is five years ago.
Yeah, 5 years ago. Yeah. So lost my job during COVID. And the guy said to me, I went back to the recruiter and said, I've just lost my job because of COVID. He said, look, we can set up this interview and this and this. He said, but like things are getting bad now because it's really starting to clamp down. The first lockdown was just about to happen, but we didn't know that at the time. He said, look, I really like you. Do you want a job in recruitment? And I went, yeah, sure. So we went down, we had a chat, and we sat in this hotel, and it was and he slid a piece of paper in front of me, and it was the biggest deal he'd ever done, and it was like 23 grand, and he ran a self-employed model. Now, from a mindset perspective, I just lost my job. COVID was about to kick in. I knew that it was going to be rough, but if I could ride this out, because a lot of people were going to be in the same scenario, I could finally launch myself into my own business by all accounts. And so he said, look, you would have made 50% of this. And at that time, I was making 30, 35 grand. When someone slides a piece of paper and you're saying you could have earned 11, 12, 13 grand, like
from one placement,
the cost of opportunity is just so high that I just couldn't say no, because I'd never had even seen that money. And just started working there, started doing a little bit of tinkering over the COVID period. Eventually we started coming back in, face masks on, but we made it work. And I think I was their first hire actually. It was a really young business as well. So it was an interesting time, but I had a great fun. Really good fun.
Okay. So, I've never, by the way, I ask every single person how they got into recruitment. I've never heard any story quite like that one before. That's a unique trajectory.
Do you know what? It's interesting because I tell that story now. I used to be a little bit embarrassed of it because you have a lot of jobs. As a recruiter, you'd see that as a massive negative.
Of course, yeah.
And you think a job hopper. But I realized that it's why people connect with me and people join our business now, because they see a lot of that story in themselves. They couldn't quite find that right fit. Something wasn't right. There's a whole other side of that story where the business went really well. When I got into recruitment, went really, really well, and then went really, really badly. And, turnover went super high and all of this kind of stuff. And I think because people relate to that, I've actually learned to tell that story, because not that I'm necessarily still proud of it, but I know that it's my story and people resonate with it, and other people feel a place of like, oh, I can relax a bit. Okay.
So do you feel like ultimately you were destined to be your own boss, and there's like the people who gravitate to you are kind of in that same mold? Yeah.
They've probably not found something that is fitting for them quite right. And one of the first things I say when I talk to a recruiter is I am a terrible employee, but I just didn't know I was an entrepreneur. Because a lot of people don't know that's what, they don't like to be told what to do. A lot of recruiters we're seeing at the moment, and they're super experienced and they know what they're doing. They're like, leave me alone, just let me do what I'm good at. And I think that's the kind of people that gravitate towards us, which is exactly what we want, to be honest with you.
Okay. Wow. All right. Awesome. So tell me about how your business works now then.
So we, in the cleanest sense, is we help recruiters become self-employed. So we help them start up their own independent businesses, and they do it under a tree. So they do it under TRE, ironically.
The recruitment experts.
Yeah, the recruitment experts.
Okay.
And so the idea is that we will give them the blueprints, so we give them all of the CRMs, the systems, the automations, the AI products, all of that stuff, the job boards, everything that they need. And then they go into a specialized sector. We pay them 70% of the fee. We take 30 as a business, and then we'll help them with all of the back-end admin, invoicing, and that kind of stuff. So essentially what we're trying to do is take away all of the thought process, the horrible stuff that recruiters don't like doing, and give them the freedom to pick their clients, pick and choose when they work. We don't set KPIs or targets or anything like that. So they really get to run it themselves. And so the idea is that people that have wanted to make, like, you must speak to a ton of people and they go, I really want to, but I don't know the first thing about business, or, I just don't have enough money to do the startup, or, I'm running a business at the moment, which is what we're seeing a lot of, and the costs are through the roof and everything is, really, really difficult, and it's taking a load of my time and I'm not actually doing recruitment. And we've had a few people recently just fold their business into ours. It's still their business, but it just means that they can do the recruitment rather than the horrible stuff. Yeah.
I mean, it's true. What we see is that a lot of people who start a recruitment business are great recruiters, they're great salespeople, but they don't necessarily know how to run an actual business. And so that's kind of what we teach them is, how do you actually turn this into a business and not just, get a job, fill a job. But also with that, as you say, when you run a business, you're doing a lot of other things apart from talking to clients, talking to candidates, doing deals. There's a whole host of other things you have to now do, like your taxes, your website, your marketing, and so on. So I can see that appealing to people for sure. So give me examples of, like, is it any niche, any part of the, like, is it the UK? How does that actually work?
Yeah, so one of the guys keeps pestering me to go TRE International. UK based at the moment, but that might change soon. We'll see. But you can work anywhere. So we've got a lady who lives in Spain. We've got 2 people from South Africa. And they work remotely, but in the UK market.
So wait. So clear. So it's UK market, but you can actually live anywhere. So that's part of the appeal is,
if you've got a laptop and a phone, do it from anywhere. I mean, I think the big thing for us is just time zones. If your time zone's equivalent, South Africa is 1-2 hours, same as Spain. So as long as you don't live in Australia, then I think it'll be all right.
Okay.
And then, in terms of, what we actually do to help these guys. So we will help them.
Before we get to that, so the market niche, so like your background is estate agency.
Yeah.
But is it basically any niche that whatever their background is, then you help them to set up a business in that?
So we'll help them identify their niche.
Okay.
And what we'll do is we'll say, our bread and butter at the moment is estate agency and financial services, because they are directly in correlation to what we have experience in. But we're now, we've just taken on someone that's doing prop tech and SaaS products. We're also doing temp agency stuff now that's about to come to fruition.
Okay.
So basically any niche, any industry, anywhere. I guess great tagline.
All right. Okay. So first of all, let's just talk about this, because people who listen to my podcast will know that I'm a big believer in focusing on a niche rather than doing a bit of everything. And one of the first things that whenever we work with a new client, that is what we need to figure out is, let's define or redefine your market niche, because everything else we do from then on, whether it's business development or marketing related or what have you, branding, really is predicated on having that really clearly defined niche.
Yeah.
But what's your take on it? Why do you think that that's important? Do you know what drives me crazy? Paying 5 different vendors for 5 different tools that don't talk to each other. Your ATS over here, your sequencing tool over there, your note taker somewhere else. And now you've got data silos everywhere, and your team has to learn 5 different systems. That's why I'm excited about Recruiter Flow, an AI-first ATS and CRM that's a true all-in-one platform. You get ATS, CRM, email sequencing, AI note-taking, business intelligence, and data enrichment, all integrated in one place. One vendor, one login, one system your team actually uses, and no surprise add-ons, jacking up your price every quarter. I'm very selective about who I partner with on this show, and I only work with products I genuinely believe in. Recruiter Flow checks all the boxes. To see how it works, book a demo at recruitmentcoach.com/recruiterflow.
Yeah, I mean, I think that general recruiters will be gone soon. I think with things like AI now pushing them kind of boundaries a little bit further, and they'll keep nipping at heels. I think that the specialists is where they need to be.
Yeah.
And I think you're completely right. I think that everything that you should do should be based off of your market niche. And so for example, your marketing needs to be relevant for your clients, but if you don't have a set avatar for your client, how is it going to be useful? How is it going to be, how are you going to provide value to your client if they do loads of different things?
100%. And you used a word that we use actually too, which is ideal client avatar. And there's so much noise in the marketplace that in order for you to cut through and actually get someone's attention, whether it's a client or a candidate, it really has to resonate for them. It has to speak their language.
Yep.
You have to understand their pain points and their, unique challenges and the trends that are happening in their industry. Otherwise, they're just going to delete or ignore, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that one of the first things that we do is once we've got our niche, we'll say, right, what does the ideal person look like? And like you say, I mean, it's cutting through the noise, and I think it's what most people struggle with when they first start, because they struggle to put themselves in their client's shoes, and that process needs to continue. I think we hear the clients aren't coming back to you. Well, have you given them a reason to come back to you? And it's because they didn't start with that avatar and understand what that person looks and feels like, and how they will map their business out and all of these things. And actually, I think a lot of people would benefit from doing their industry. Actually, if they're doing financial services, be a mortgage advisor or whatever it might be for a little while, to understand that. I'm sure if you asked a client and said, look, can I just shadow one of your people for a week? I'll give you, a free placement or whatever, the value that you would get from that is insane. And actually we're finding that the more niche you are, we've got recruiters, we've got a gentleman called Alex who works for us, and he's a great recruiter. But if you think about this, he works in a state agency, but he only covers the West Midlands. Yeah. And within that, he probably tackles around 4 to 5 job titles. That is niche. Yeah. But guess what? Anybody who needs that, they already know. They just pick up the phone. Yeah, I've got something for you. Cool. And because of that also affects his candidate kind of journey, because he only connects with the relevant people, but it means he's got a lockdown on everything he needs to do. And so therefore he has coverage for every single little area and every single nook and cranny. Yeah. Which means that he can, I'm sure if he ever turned evil, he could probably collapse a load of these businesses, because he has such an understanding of what these jobs are needed and who does what and all of these businesses that that's where it all stems from. That's where a good recruiter stems from. And that's where I think that technology will always struggle. So I think general recruiters are probably going to be in for a rough time.
Yeah, that's definitely a trend. And there's exceptions to everything, right? But that's definitely one of our core philosophies as well. So identifying the niche, and then what are some of the other keys to success, and based on the businesses that are successful within your network?
Yeah, I think we've got the normal recruitment traits. And I think a bit like anything, we have to recruit on two sides of the thing, which is what makes a good recruiter and what makes a good business owner, because you can't have one with it. You can have a great business owner, but if they're not doing recruitment, but funnily enough, you can have a great recruiter, but if they don't know how to scale the business, they're always going to be in a box. Yeah. And so we're trying to show recruiters how they can build and scale their businesses. So the first one is they have to be willing to take on information. And, I know that everyone says, I love to learn and stuff. But when you've been doing for something for 10, 15 years, and then I come to you and say, right, we need to strip all of this back and this is how you need to do something. Yeah. It's a hard pill to swallow, but I think that there's a lot of recruiters at the moment that are going through changes because the industry's changing quite a lot.
Definitely.
So have to be willing to learn, have to look at every aspect. They also need to know...
Sorry, let me just pause you there. Because by the way, there's a lot of what you're saying that I resonate with in terms of one of the things we look for in a client is how coachable is someone, right? If they're fixed in their ways and they're not open to changing or trying new things or getting outside their comfort zone or embracing new technology or tactics or what have you, I'm not going to be able to help them, right? Exactly. Because, and if what they're doing is working, then great. But I feel like, especially in this market and with AI and everything else, you absolutely have to be adaptable because what worked for you in the past may not continue necessarily to work for you in the future. Yeah. And, I think the best recruiters are always learning, always upskilling, always looking for new tools, techniques, strategies,
I think it's really interesting as well, because as a business owner, I've learned more about recruitment than ever. But, when I started this, I thought I knew everything. I thought, I'm the best. And actually, I look back at it now and I'm like, well, if I feel like this, then every person going through this journey needs to feel the same, as in, whoa, I've come such a long way.
Yeah.
And, it can be time, labor intensive and stuff to find those new technologies. And there's businesses that can help fast track that. I'm sure you give a great blueprint to that. And we do something similar. But ultimately, you have to be able to willing to invest in yourself to make. And so, you can throw money at a problem, but it doesn't solve the knowledge issue. And
right.
So that's one thing. And I think the other thing is that we're looking for someone who's not in a trapped mindset. Again, I talk about mindset a lot with these guys because going from employed to self-employed, we've noticed two or three trends across self-employed people. One, they call them, is it okay if I take some holiday? Yeah, sure. You don't have to ask me anymore. This is your business. Number two is that they take it too far the other way, and they say, I'll start at 10. I'm going to take my dog out, and then I'll clock off at 4 and have some beers with the boys. And they're actually, if this was you doing it on your own, you would have to slog it out. You have to put in the graft, and hours in C ultimately, when you first start a business, equal hours in success. And so, to make sure that they manage everything correctly, either way of that pendulum. And then the last thing is, some people just really struggle to adapt to being not employed, I suppose. They're so fearful of that mindset, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, but sometimes I'll say, you can earn £10,000 and here's a full breakdown of how this works. You can earn £20,000. This is how this works. And they go, no, that's not possible. No, because they're so conditioned to
limited,
think. And so,
mindset.
And that mindset issue is a really hard thing to overcome. And ultimately, it's a big barrier to entry because it feeds back into the training side of it. And so,
but do you think because I don't know if we can really, we can train skills, we can teach strategies. We can definitely help people to make shifts in their mindset, but mindset is one that's really tough to change for externally. I think that has to come from them, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that you can give them the breadcrumbs to follow. And if I look at myself, I was someone that went completely 180, and I'm a different person than I was 5 years ago, for example. And so, I'm the advocate for change, and so. If I can do it, then in theory, everyone should be able to do it. Have you been fired from 20 jobs? No? Cool. Brilliant. And so I think the big thing for me is, yes, you might be able to, you can't give them everything and it has to be almost self-discovery. But what you can do is lay the breadcrumbs and say, right, look into this, talk to this person, do this. But sometimes it's a losing battle. And like you say, you can't move people if they don't want to be moved.
Right.
And so it's the willingness to change, which obviously feeds back into the trainability of someone. So, I think that one of my advantages is that I'm fairly young in recruitment by all accounts, but I think that's actually been a massive advantage for me because I've adopted with the new change, the new flow that's coming through, the new wave of recruiters. And sometimes I speak, I had a conversation with someone the other day. I said, right, what do you know about ChatGPT? And they went, what? And I was like, what? And just little things like that. And what tools do you use? And they're like, I just send 1,000 messages out on LinkedIn. And I'm like, okay, let's start again. So I think with that new wave of people coming through, I think that we're all starting to adopt change a little bit better now. But it takes time, doesn't it? And there are some other smaller things that we look for. How do they know their niche? We're not here to babysit. I'm not here to teach people how to close deals. I'm not here to teach them, the basics of recruitment. We can help them specialize and sharpen their skills, especially in business, because that's the side that they're traditionally be lacking. But we don't take someone that's got 6 months experience. Most of our guys, 5, 10, 15 years experience. And then, sometimes there's an argument, so maybe we need slightly less because it's an easier change to take in new skills, but it's a battle.
So then the journey that they're going on with you, so there's focusing on their niche, and then what else are the kind of, in your blueprint that you mentioned, what else is in there?
So we look at so obviously defining the niche, we'll then obviously build out the avatars, and then what we'll do, so we do things at head office, back end, and so we'll set up marketing funnels and AI tools for them so they can basically build and develop their own business. So
what does that really mean? Can you break that down a little bit?
So we've got so email marketing, obviously it's fairly self-explanatory, but we run 2 different campaigns. So we'll have a candidate and a client campaign, and they are lead magnets essentially. So they relay back to websites where they can pop in their details, and whether that's free CV templates, whether that is salary guides, whether that's X, Y, and Z. And so we'll also give them what I refer to as actual real content, which is, some of the content that we give out to some of the guys for their email funnels are, for example, holidays. Unlimited holiday is actually statistically proven to show that you actually take less holiday than more.
That's true.
So, if you're a business owner and you say, that's really helpful. And so we actually try and provide content that's really, really helpful rather than just use us, we're recruiters, because that just doesn't work anymore. So that's one part of it. The other part is we have automation tools for LinkedIn and other bits like that, which we run in the background just to make sure the guys are building out their audience. And then there is a few different things where you can use Clay with Lemlist and like Phantom Buster. So you can basically build things to strip details from websites, from emails and all of that kind of stuff. So we basically, the main aim for us is we want to populate as quickly as possible a database.
Right.
So data is obviously king at the moment, and the companies with the biggest databases, I have a belief that job boards will be gone. At least majority of them will be gone at some point because their value is declining fairly rapidly. And so I have a sneaking suspicion. So I have a horrible feeling that AI will take its place. So I think whoever can adopt AI and has a strong database will be the businesses that survive the great recruitment culling, I suppose, which is probably on its way. And so, for us, it's about helping these guys build out their data, build out their areas, understand their niche in a much more in-depth way as well, because surface level knowledge doesn't go as far. So is there a course that they need to go on? Do they need to go do real life experience? What do they need to know? Can I do sessions with them? And then we'll run the other side of that coin, which is business training. So something that I've realized is businesses, whatever gets you from 0 to 2 deals or 5 grand's worth of bankings, and then what gets you from 5 to 10 and then 10 to 20 and 20 to 50, they're all different processes. And so what we have to do is take that person and what stage they're in, show them what the barriers of entry are going to be, how they can overcome them, take them to the next stage. Once they're at that next stage, right, take them to the next stage. And so we help them scale up until they're happy. I mean, some people, they don't want an empire. They just want an easy life and they want to work 4 days a week or 3 days a week and just, cash in based on what they've got. Some people want 4 virtual assistants under them and they want, a team of recruiters and they want the world. And so, we'll help them scale accordingly what works for them.
So, let's press pause here on the go-to-market stuff, clay.com, and because we use that as well. Phenomenal tool, extremely powerful. So we have a team member who just focuses on that, is building out our outbound campaigns. And what for you guys can you give me an example? Like what's been one of the most successful outreach campaigns where you've combined, say, clay.com and Lemlist, or what do you find works the best?
So we've got 2 that we're trialing at the moment, and they're both proving very successful compared to some of the other ones we've run, which were maybe a little bit more traditional, just ping an email, reply back to us if you need any help, which was outbound candidate outreach. So for example, if someone, it's a backfilling job. So if someone leaves a business and joins another, we'd send out an email to that business using Clay as the source pool. And then what we would do is we'd send them an email saying, hey, I've got a X person that would fit this role. There is a point where we might be able to take that a step further and actually find someone in the database, because it has our CRM system has the ability. So we're trying to hook that up at the moment, and we'll actually be able to give them a real life candidate that's actively looking, which would be cool. But at the moment, it's, we'll send out, no, she's got a role on, we have, and then it will pull the data, X amount of candidates in this area. We'd love to see if we can help. Give us a call. And that works extremely well. most of our clients at the moment is value, 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 and then you have to hit them at the exact right time, as most people do, which is when they need you. And so that's working really well because we've got the campaigns running in the background, and then it would just be a fire off email to say, hey, notice you got this thing, blah, blah, blah.
So wait, let me just try to understand. Yeah. So I love this idea, by the way. So it's basically a backfilling campaign.
Yep.
So your automation is identifying the signal, which is that someone has left their job and started a new job.
And they see
so then we use Clay to figure out, okay, who potentially is the hiring manager from their previous employer.
Yep.
Like, okay, so this candidate has got a new position. Where have they come from?
Yep.
Who is their hiring manager?
Yep.
Let's scrape that data, enrich it, add them to an outbound campaign. And you're using Lemlist for the outreach?
So we use Clay combined with ChatGPT and Phantom Buster for that one. So it'll just send the email, and it's got set parameters. So it'll say, please add first name, add job title, add the candidate. Candidate's name was one of them, but that didn't work very well. It was a bit too personal, interestingly.
I'll circle back to that because I want to know more. So. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. So they basically just send, and then it'll format the email for us, and then it just sends them automatically. It's connected to our Outlooks, and so that's run by the recruiter. So it'll go out by their name.
Yeah.
And so it'll say they have an open position. Love to be able to help on that. We've got X amount of candidates. It'll pull that data from our CRM system to show how many candidates we've got under that job title in that area, and then it will send that. We did someone that said we have 0 candidates in that area.
Whoops,
Whoops, put in minimum as 5.
Okay.
But so that's a fairly easy exercise because if someone leaves, it's an open opportunity. Mm-hmm. It's good. There's definitely improvements can be made, and that is something that we want to tack onto. That is that we wanted to be able to add. When people post jobs on LinkedIn and then scrape multiple job boards to check Indeed and that stuff. And that would all be in one campaign ideally. So then we've got multiple different fields of outreach for one campaign, because at the moment we wanted to do it via loads of separate ones and it was all going a bit bonkers because you have leads coming from different places. So if something went wrong, you're like, which one went wrong? Why did it fail? So that campaign's worked really, really well. And
so what's cool about this? I mean, backfilling is nothing new. That's an old school strategy, but you've got it automated.
Yeah.
So that's the cool part.
It's a lot of the old stuff still works.
Yeah.
But it's how can you ease the pain of doing that? Because it can be pretty labor intensive.
Well, also just exactly the time of being able to figure out where are the openings? Who are the hiring managers? What's their email address?
Yeah.
That's a lot of work that you've outsourced to Clay and ChatGPT.
And even stuff that, for anyone who wants an easier version of that, they can just build like a ChatGPT bot. So something that we showed to the new starters is we've got an AI bot called Steve. It's I name everything Steve because it's just the first name that pops into my head every time. So it's Steve, and Steve's designed to help recruiters build out customized emails. And so, for example, if they spot a job on Indeed, for example, they can pop in the person's profile, their LinkedIn profile under the business, and then they'll pop in the Indeed ad, and then it will customize an email that will go out to them, and it'll also scrape the data if it can find it.
Great.
And so that's just a really, everyone can sit down and it'll take them 20 minutes to write out that, check it over, and it's something simple that they could implement straight away. And
just to clarify, is that a custom GPT or is it an actual agent?
It's a custom ChatGPT bot.
Okay.
So anyone can create one. You just you sign in, you say create bot in the back end, and you basically give it a list of commands. We made ours particularly sassy, and just to liven it up a bit, keep the guys amused. So it quips jokes at people, but the actual emails it sends out. And something for me was that I was getting a lot of responses from my emails that I was sending out to clients because we help our guys get clients sometimes. And so sometimes if an email's better coming from me rather than them, we'll do that. And so what I was noticing is I was getting a lot more traction with my emails. And the guy said, well, how you send your emails. So, well, slightly different every time. And so I gave it, I made it basically because it speaks like me. And actually the guys all of a sudden start getting a lot more message backs and kickbacks and stuff. And it's obviously a language thing and how I talk. But I'm assuming that it's not as easy to replicate as you think. And sometimes you'll send an email and someone else send an email and you go, they're pretty similar. I don't know why this one worked, but this one didn't. And so it was actually easier just to replicate it over a chatbot and give it everything that I've written over the last 6 months, for example, and just paste it all in there and say, this is how I talk. This is how I, I think it's casual language. I think that's the reason mine's had more success. But trying to teach people casual language is difficult.
Well, look, I love copywriting and I feel like it's a craft and it is tough for people to learn. Some people just are more interested and maybe have more aptitude for it than others.
Yeah.
What I find with, and so the way you've done it is clever because you're leveraging ChatGPT, but you're also adding your own voice, the style guide, and you're training it with examples of campaigns that were successful.
Correct, yeah.
And so that definitely gives people a huge head start.
Yeah, and that they, I think over time everyone learns their own slightly different way of doing things, and so they'll take that and they might adopt it, and I'll show them the back end. So if they want to tweak it themselves and play around with that, then
absolutely.
They can make it.
I do think what works in one market may not translate to another.
100%.
And I also feel like it should sound like you communicate, but as you say, making it slightly less formal, because if it's a very formal, and especially if it's too long, it's a dead giveaway that it's just a mass message, right? Whereas if it's a little less formal and short, then it comes across more like an individual email, I think.
I'll give everyone my 2 top tips.
Okay, let's hear it.
Number 1, 4 to 5 lines is ideal from our testing. Number 2 is once you do a follow-up email, type in the bottom of it, sent from my iPhone.
Right. I've thought of this before. Yeah.
And
do you think that actually works?
Yeah, it upticked about 20%.
Really? Okay,
which
that's
is pretty
hilarious.
cool.
One of our friends and a guy who's been on the podcast a few times, Rich Rosen, actually intentionally puts in typos into the email because then people would think, well, they'd never scale out an email with mistakes in it, right? So
it's actually it's something that probably I do, but not intentionally. But I one of the big things that I try and teach the guys is it's the thought of the message, usually not the message. And so if you're sending a message to someone, whether that's a voice note, whether that's a message on LinkedIn, don't get in your head about it. I notice recruiters and they sit there for like 20 minutes and they're like, and I'm like, just type what you think, type whatever it is. If you make a mess up, for example, in a voice, keep it in. Like, you're real people, like mistakes happen. It's not the end of the world and people will appreciate it.
Absolutely. And especially because it's now possible to clone like your voice and even your video. And so if you make a mistake or it's not 100% perfect, it actually seems more real. Because it is. And so it's more authentic, it's more human, and therefore I think actually might increase your response.
I think it will. That's a really good point. I think that will actually in the future be a big thing. Like if they see a mistake, they go, oh, it is a like.
Yeah, because how will you won't be able to tell.
Won't be able to tell.
Is this a real person?
Yeah.
Or is this really James? Right. Yeah. And so I think being authentic, being yourself, if you make a mistake, just rolling with it, I think that is actually maybe in some ways better.
I think from a mindset view, once you get past that hurdle of not worrying so much what you send, I think that also brings, like, I was on the phone to one of the guys on the way, and she said, "Are you nervous?" And I don't get nervous anymore. She said, "Oh, interesting. Why?" And I said, because what's the worst that could happen? And if I mess up, it's not a problem. Like, why would you get nervous about something you don't need to be nervous about? And actually, I think that, when you stop worrying about, one, what what you think of yourself, more importantly, rather than what other people think of you, you stop caring so much in the right ways. As in, you still care about the end result, you still want to do a good job, but you stop sweating over the little things. And I think, you know, the guys, you know, some of my clients, they send me messages back and I'm like, I can't even read that, like, because they're just like that, and so I have to call them. But if they don't care, from a respect that they trust you enough to, you know, I'm sure if he sends out a nice offer letter, it's not going to look like that. But, you know, from the respect that he trusts you enough just to drop you a message, like a text message or like a friend or whatever, then you should reciprocate. And so, you know, obviously there's levels in everything, and sometimes you'll have to be a little bit more professional and sometimes you won't. But at the same time, you know, it's about adapting to what's around you, making sure that you understand your client and all of that stuff. But it all comes from authenticity.
Definitely. I agree on that. Okay. So you've got campaigns running.
Yep.
We've talked about the one that's working well for you guys, which is the backfill campaign. We actually have noticed that I want to hear the story about the one that didn't work because it named the candidate who had vacated the position.
Yeah. So
by the way, I hope I like getting really tactical here because people like
the value's in the details,
exactly,
isn't it?
You got it.
And like if we send email what kind of email campaign is that? So yeah, I mean, I think when we started sending emails, I would love to be a fly on the wall, but sometimes, let's say someone leaves and they're a bit gutted about it, and you send in them a follow-up email, bam, like that, and they say, "Oh, I've noticed Lucy left. Would love to give you a hand." And they're like, "Did you take Lucy?" Like, I think the assumption was, if you're using their name, how did you know about it so quickly? Were you the person that? And you know, I've had businesses that I've taken people from, and I said, "Look, use me, and I'll stop taking stuff." Really sorry, but it's just part of business.
50-50. I found it can work or it can backfire and they don't want to speak to you. But
and so I think it was just a little bit close to home. So the more general approach, and then we would bring it up on the phone. Oh yeah, we've got a system that runs. You know, so that was quite a good one. And then we have run some other campaigns as well that have done poorly, great. One of the ones that's probably lead magnets are probably the big one that we're focusing on at the moment, and there's the most success. And I think that's mostly because of value add. Yeah. So you always have to think, right, what's really valuable to my client, and this works for both sides of that campaign. So client or candidate, can I build a useful asset for them? Because the thing is, assets are reusable. So the email, so if you're writing out a custom email every time to your clients, that's very time consuming. If you build a salary guide, or if you build your top 5 CV templates or whatever it is, that's a reusable asset over time. And for example, you have to change the yearly salaries, but that's not really that difficult. But if you build up a repertoire of assets that you can use over the next 10 years, you know, and then just keep refreshing them, and as the branding comes along and as the information changes, you know, and be able to give that, I think that is the best use. And all you do is you do something really simple, and that is you set up a lead funnel where, you know, you've got a open page or a password protected something. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it. And they just punch in the details and they say, yeah, cool. And you'll say, look, just got an asset guide. Do you want a copy? It's a great conversation starter. It's a really, really easy way. And also, if you've got clients that are on the edge and you say, look, I've got a bunch of free assets. Do you want to have a look at them? It just gives you credibility. It shows that you know what you're talking about. And it comes down to being niche as well, because every industry will have a slightly different determining on what's useful in their niche. You know, it could be, you know, I'll help you build out a finance calculator because you're an FS business. And so you could have a template for that. So think about what your audience needs, and then think about, right, how can I leverage that? Because it's all about leverage. Clients won't use you if you don't have any leverage, whether that's a candidate that you've got or whether that's an asset that they need. That's where the value is. And so we noticed the response rate from that was just insane, you know.
What do you consider insane? Because
50% sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, 50%.
Okay, I've never. So let me just find out more about this. So, what list was this going to? Was this a cold list?
So the first one we run was the worst one. So that was a state agency, and it was a test group of, I think it was like 1,000 people, and our response rate was about 10%.
When you say people, is this client?
These were
prospects?
estate agency owners.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
And we sent that out, and the initial list, and it was a salary guide, and the uptick on that was like 10%.
Which actually is good for cold outreach.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, ours was curated to current clients, so that obviously will affect it slightly.
Definitely. Yeah.
And then I think the best one we done was we done a live webinar guide where they could basically punch in their details and build out a live webinar that they could host their own recruitment events on. And so it was like a live hosting advert. And that was a really small test group because unfortunately it broke our website hosting function fairly quickly. But it was just a principle to say, right, if we change the asset, does it change the response rate, or is it always roughly around the same no matter the asset? It turns out it's completely down to what the asset was, because our read rate
100%. Was it has to be something they actually want, right? And that is the key to successful lead magnet. Is you can't just offer anything. And this is where I find recruiters, like, they try something and then it doesn't work straight out of the gate. And they're like, oh, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And like, so if I say, okay, let's create a lead magnet and explain why they would want that and what the purpose is. And as you said, it's generating value. It's establishing your credibility. It's inducing the law of reciprocity. It lets them get to know you before using your service and so on. So they buy into the idea, and then, but they choose a topic, or for whatever reason, the client doesn't care enough about that particular topic, and it kind of doesn't work as well as they're hoping, and they're disappointed, and then they kind of give up on the idea. But we just need to keep testing to find what's the one that you're going to get that response to.
And you can build off of that. And, A/B testing was something that I look back when I was actually doing recruitment, and I was like, I think back to it now, and I said to the guys, what's your customer journey? What's your client journey? What emails are you sending? How do they look? Can you upscale everything that you do by 1%? That's the classic adage, like the 1% gains everywhere.
Right.
And so we've just redesigned our emails for email confirmations, and they look lovely. They look completely different. They're not just a basic email. It custom fills everything out for the recruiter, but it looks really smart. And then they click on a page and they have a full breakdown of interview prep stuff now. So they are able to go through that, and that journey is different. But guess what? It wasn't our first iteration that we got right. It wasn't the second. We kept having to make them and change it and tweak it and make it better.
Yeah.
And I think recruiters are instant gratification demons, which is, did it work? No. Okay,
I don't think it's just recruiters. I think that's most humans, right? And for sure.
And like you say, you've got to find that one thing that kicks it off, but it might not start as one thing. It might be one asset that works. So then you go, I can do this because of that.
Yeah.
And so, I think every single business and every single recruiter needs to look at what their journey is, what their client and candidate journey is. What are they offering? I sat down and asked my recruiters the other day, what value do you provide outside of recruitment? And they were like, They eventually they got there, and there's tons of value, but if they don't know it straight away, then it's really difficult for you. Like if you don't know what your value proposition is like that, then how are you going to say that to your client? And put them on the spot obviously never works. It's like doing a test call, but like the main thing was like really think about where you can add value, and your value could be, look, I give the best candidate journey you've ever seen. Like you could make it one of your selling points, that this process is like unlike no other, and work towards that.
Okay, awesome. That makes sense. So the 50% response rate, what was that?
So that was the webinar host function. So that was our best one.
I don't really understand what the offer was.
So it was an email that went out, and basically we've seen a business recently, and they were launching they were launching webinars to recruit people. And so it was a live webinar. Yeah. And so what we done is we said, we will host your webinar for free. And we will host it to our database. So the idea was they would click a button, they would book in, it would then host a live webinar for them. And so it would put in the business name, it would put in who the thing is. We would sit in as background as administrators, and then it would send it out to our database and say, we've got a live webinar in this area for this job. Come along if you want to learn more about this business. And so it was a really direct version of it.
Okay.
And we sent it out to 50 clients, and half of them came back, and we only ended up hosting about 10 in the end.
Okay.
But we signed a good, I think it was 7 or 8 clients out of that. But it was that's
a cool idea.
It was really good. It has a lot of back end problems.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a straightforward one to pull off. If you can pull it off, that's really, I've never heard of someone doing that. That's quite cool.
Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, was this offered to existing clients?
Correct, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so existing clients.
I understand how you got such a high response rate, because
yeah.
I misunderstood. I thought it was like a cold email campaign.
Yeah, the cold email campaigns, you kind of need to be, it's a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, a little bit softer and subtle approaches, and that would be a very bold thing to send out to your current clients. I wouldn't suggest it.
Yeah.
But what we do for all of our clients is we do jab hook, I think we call it.
Jab right hook.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously our aim is content, get to know you, then ask.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than you add someone on, LinkedIn and say, hey, I've noticed you got a job. And so it's very crass in a lot of ways. You wouldn't ask someone to marry you on the first date. And
right.
So, we spend a lot of time nurturing these people. And what we try and want to do is start nurturing campaigns before even people have started. So then when they do come in, they're able to go, cool, and then they can do their hook and it's there straight away.
When you say before people have started, what do you mean by that?
So, for example, I mean, a lot of our businesses that we do, they're usually split geographically.
Okay.
So, not always. It just depends on the industry. Everyone's slightly different. But for example, a state agency, we do geographically. So we've got, for example, we've got no one's covering Scotland at the moment. So maybe what we do is we build out pre-data, and then what we do is we start warming them up with really, really good content coming out already. When we do finally get someone in, we'll say, brilliant, we've just had a new recruiter start. Boom, you've got a warmed up audience. You've got a database already built for you.
Oh, that's cool.
And that would, imagine how much that would speed up the process.
Right, yeah. Because there's always a ramp up period. And so coming back to your proposition, essentially, like, what is the ramp up period for someone who's wanting to start their own recruitment business, and before they're starting to actually see returns? And I know that's a piece of string, right? Because how long's a piece of string? And a lot of it is down to how much effort are they willing to put in. Yeah,
so we usually see most people bank their first deal within a month or two.
Wow,
so
that's pretty quick.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah.
And we work on a system where as soon as it hits our account, it's straight back out. So we pay them as they come, just like it would a business.
Okay.
And so, and most of the industries we work, they like 7-day turnarounds after, payment terms. So it's pretty quick.
Okay.
So yeah, most of the time, I think our fastest ever one was like 7 days. And that was 7-ish days. And that was a lady covering in Scotland. She was very quick. But most of them you'll see, and the ramp up is usually, if they do 1 in their first month, you'll usually see 2 in the second, and then 3 in the third, and then they start leveling out depending on what industry it is and what the fee size is. So if it's perm placements, for example, and let's say it was construction where the fees are super high, it's probably going to be a max of 1 or 2 deals. So that might take a little bit longer, might be up to 3. Whereas something like a state agency or financial services, it's usually 1 to 2 months, and they can do, well, as many as the heart's content. But usually we see the physical limitations of not driving themselves insane and not trying to break their back, about 4 or 5 placements a month, which is pretty good.
That's still, yeah.
I mean, once they get, we do encourage the guys once they get to a certain point to bring on a VA, and then sky's your limit. I mean, it'll take you to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. James, this has been very different to what I was expecting, and very interesting and enjoyable. So thanks for coming on the show. What we're going to do is include, obviously, all your information in the show notes. So if people want to reach out to you to learn more about what you guys do, then I'm sure they'll follow up with you. But final question, I guess, is how many businesses have you helped to start, and then what is the common denominator between all the people who've had the most success with your system?
Yeah, I think so. We've helped 18, soon to be 21 now, as of next month, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
And I would say the most common thing, and this is the most generic answer, is just resilience. It's so hard. And you will take an absolute pounding, and it's only compounded when it's your business because it's your reputation, it's your money. The fees aren't 10% anymore. It's worth a lot more to you.
Yes.
And you need to keep your head up. You need to keep your head above water. You need, so we encourage the guys to go speak to each other, share stories, have a laugh, to try and bring down that burden of, don't do it alone, so there's probably resilience, and just don't do it alone. Just share your story with other people, share that burden.
I would 100% agree with that. And James, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you for listening to The Resilient Recruiter. I know how busy recruiters are, so I'm honored that you're investing this time with me each week. I don't take your attention for granted. That's why I'm going all out to deliver value for you here, real insights you can apply to improve your business. And if you really want to help me to reach a wider audience and impact more people, please consider leaving the show a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you leave me a review, please reach out and let me know so I can thank you personally. Please hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.